Hi, and welcome to Explorer Classroom. My name is Jennifer Bergen, and I am so happy that you are joining us today. At National Geographic, we know that the power of exploration, wonder, and storytelling can change the world. And this Explorer Classroom YouTube show connects students from all over the world with our National Geographic explorers for short lessons and time for your questions. Today, our explorer is Dr. Imogen Napper. Imogen is a plastic detective and investigates how small pieces of plastic get into water, like our ocean, and what this does to animal and human health, and how we can keep plastic out of the water. She is also a marine scientist. Sometimes she works in a lab, and sometimes she goes out into the field to collect samples and do research. So whether she's sailing on a boat down the Ganges River or in a lab in the United Kingdom, Imogen wants to stop plastic pollution, and she's going to teach you how to help. But before we get into today's lesson, let's welcome our friends who are joining in from around the world. Today's registered guests represent places all across the United States, Canada, and the globe. So let's give a shout out to Huntington Union Free School District, Cappy Culver Elementary School, the St. Luke's School, McGraw Interbaccalaureate World School, Jenkintown Elementary, Chain O Lakes Elementary, Building Block Commons, Sheikh Hillel Community School, American Center for Children, Sorrento Springs Elementary, Hoffman Boston Elementary, that's my school, Rollins Place Elementary, Johnsonville Elementary, Wabeno Elementary, Woburn Junior Public School, Osuna Elementary School. We are thrilled to have all of you and more here with us today. So with that, let's hand over Explorer Classroom to Imogen. She's going to get us started and share all about hidden plastic. Take it away, Imogen.
Hi everyone, good afternoon. I'm coming from London in the UK, but it's great to see so many of you around the world. So bear with me while I just share my screen. And please shout if you can't see it. But my name's Dr. Imogen Napper, and I'm a plastics researcher. And today I'm going to tell you all about my research and how wonderful our oceans are and why we need to protect it. So hands up if you love the ocean. I see a lot of you with your hands up. I love the ocean a lot. And I was actually very fortunate, very lucky that I used to grow up next to a seaside town called Clevedon in the UK. But how did it all start for me? Well, I'm a marine scientist, which means I study the things in the ocean. I've been best called a plastic detective. And what does a plastic detective mean? I'm going to tell you all about that today. Being a plastic detective is all about exploring the unknown and finding solutions to some really nitty-gritty problems. Hands up again if you've ever been on a beach or in a park and seen plastic there, either some food wrappers or waste. Unfortunately, I'd say that all of us have seen litter, and that's why we need to protect the environment. So for this whole 10-minute talk, and I can't wait to also answer your questions, we'll be talking about how you can also join me in being a plastic detective, because I need an army of plastic detectives. So a little bit about me. This is me when I was about 2 or 3 years old, growing up in my seaside town called Clevedon. And this is me with my dad. And when I was younger, I used to love going to the beach. So I want you to picture in your head going to the beach and having the sand in between your fingers and your toes. And my most favorite thing to do was to draw in the sand. And I could draw in the sand for hours and hours, drawing different animals or the planes in the sky. But I never remember there being any plastic pollution. Fast forward 20 or 30 so years, and unfortunately, this is what we see on the beaches where I grew up. I was actually walking my cheeky dog Rhubarb at the back. So have a look at the picture and see if you can see him. He's the black and white dog. And we were just having a nice walk on Easter Sunday. But the sand was covered in plastic bits. was like a confetti of rubbish all over the beach. And I wanted to do something about it. So I wanted to turn that curiosity and that wonder where that plastic was coming from into action. And that's why I decided to become a marine scientist, studying the wonderful things in our ocean, but most importantly, becoming that plastic detective. So now I want you to join me in being a plastic detective. So let's have a look at some of my research. But first of all, we need to look at what plastic actually is. To be a plastic detective, we need to understand the details of plastic. So I want you to see this Lego brick and then also something called carbon and hydrogen. So if we put all of these carbon and hydrogens together, like a long chain of Lego bricks, that creates a polymer. And that's basically all plastic is. So the cover for my phone case was its plastic. It's just a long chain of carbon and hydrogen. And it makes so many wonderful products that we see in our everyday life. So this is me in my old living room. And I want you to have a look at this picture and see what you think could be plastic. So I'm sat on a plastic sofa. I've got my plastic laptop with a plastic cover on, my plastic lanyard for work, plastic headphones, my plastic coffee cup on the table there, some plastic wrapped biscuits because I've just got in from work, my plastic rucksack, which is the same rucksack that I've got next to me. So my whole house is just covered in plastic items. So have a look around your classroom or the room that you're in and guess what's plastic. Have a look, have a feel around, and you'll see that plastic is everywhere. So it's a really wonderful material. So why do we look at plastic sometimes in a negative light? So plastic is really useful, but sometimes we make so much of it that it causes an issue. And then because we're making so much of it, we can't deal with all of that waste. So a lot of it ends up in our environment. And this is actually a magazine cover from a really old magazine. And if you take a close look, you can see that there's a family there and they're chucking the plastic items into the sky because they're so excited. So have a look and have a discussion with your partner of what you can see. I can see plates, I can see cutlery, I can see drinks cups, and they're just so excited because they think that plastic is going to be the revolution. They can see how it's going to transform their lives. But we didn't think about the amount of waste that it's also going to create. So where does my research come into this? Well, my whole research looks at the sources of plastic going into the marine environment. And when we think of plastic going into the ocean, the marine environment, we might think of lost fishing equipment, such as nets, or litter dropped in towns and cities, or if you were to drop some litter on the beach. But I wanted to be a plastic detective that investigated the plastic that we don't typically always think of. So throughout this talk, I'm going to talk to you about the plastic that we find in facial scrubs when we wash our face, the washing of clothes, carrier bags, and also fishing rope or maritime rope. So we all wash our face every morning, but there used to be these tiny plastic particles in facial scrubs called microbeads. Now, microbeads were tiny plastic particles that were put into facial scrubs to act as exfoliants, so to help get dead skin cells off so our skin was nice and smooth. But no one knew how many microbeads could be in one bottle. So I looked slightly crazy going to the shops to set up my experiment, and I got loads of facial scrubs. And my job as a plastic detective was to extract all of the plastic in the facial scrub. So here is my lab, and as you can see, have a look right at the back, you can see all of the facial scrubs all in a line. And then I was using that little contraption, that device to the left, to suck all of the water and the solution through, leaving any plastics on top that I could analyze. And this is what we found. Take a look at how much plastic is in the glass vial in front of the facial scrub. There could be over 3 million tiny plastic particles in one bottle. So a squirt on your hand, if you look at your hand and put a squirt, an imaginary squirt in it, there could be over 10,000. You would wash your face, these plastic particles could go down the drain and potentially into our wonderful oceans, where so many wonderful wildlife live. But why was being a plastic detective and a scientist really exciting? Well, we were able to use this research as a fuel to make change. So this research influenced governments around the world to ban these microbeads, these microplastics in these bottles, which was a really good feeling. And it made me think that all of that hard work was completely worth it. So then it led me on to this next weird and wonderful bit of research, which is the washing of our clothes. And it's quite surprising. If you look at the clothes that you're wearing, the majority of what we wear is plastic, like polyester or acrylic. So I urge you after this to look in your wardrobes and see how many of your clothes are plastic. And when they're swishing and swirling around in the washing machine, so I want you to imagine with your hands that the piece of clothing in the washing machine is swishing and swirling about. Tiny fibers can come off and, like the microbeads, potentially go down the drain, through our sewage treatment works, and then again into our oceans. As a plastic detective, I wanted to investigate how many fibers could be coming off our clothes when they're swishing and swirling around in the washing machine. So here's my lab. I had a little washing machine and I tested all of these different types of clothes. So I tested polyester, acrylic, and polyester cotton blend. And we found a huge amount of fibers could come off our clothes in a typical clothes wash. With acrylic, a typical wash of acrylic clothing being up to 700,000 fibers. So imagine every time you wash your clothes, how many fibers could be coming off. And here's what it looks like in your hand, a tiny fluff ball of fibers. So working with Sky Ocean Rescue and National Geographic, that's how I got involved with being a National Geographic explorer. I was then able to investigate this further, but now rather than one washing machine, I have 4 washing machines that are based in the University of Plymouth. So I can continue my work looking at how we can try and stop these pesky fibers from washing our clothes, going down the drains and into our oceans. So then I also looked at something called biodegradable and compostable plastic. And when I hear the words biodegradable or compostable, I think of an orange or a plant like this plant that I have here, and that it will disappear, it will vanish in a matter of weeks or days. But what about when we hear the word biodegradable or compostable plastics? Because a lot of plastics are being labelled as being biodegradable or compostable. So to do this, I put my detective hat on and I wanted to see how quickly they would disappear in the natural environment. So have a think about what happens to these carrier bags. So I got lots of different carrier bags. My friends helped me collect lots of bags that were biodegradable or compostable. And then I cut them into tiny strips so that they were all the same size. And here's the fun bit. Using an old drumstick, because I play the drums, some fishing wire and some garden netting, I then sewed each strip into its own pouch, which took ages, but my nana was very happy with my sewing skills. And then I put them in the different environments. So first of all, I put them in some soil and buried them down deep. I put whole bags there as well, because it's just easier to see and understand. I left them hanging outside in the sunlight. And I also put them in a marina in the ocean. So what do you think happened to all of these bags? So I left them out there for a huge amount of time, 3 years, which is the whole length of my PhD. It's the longest experiment that I've ever run. But I took samples every 9 months, so it could help me tell a story of what was happening. So the bags that were left outside, they completely fragmented into tiny bits. Now, it doesn't mean it's disappearing, it just means that it's fragmenting into tiny bits. And you could say that that's harder to pick up. The reason it's fragmenting into tiny bits is because sunlight from the sun helps break down all of those carbon and hydrogens. So if you remember that Lego brick chain that we talked about earlier. So the ones in the soil, the scary thing was that after 3 years, all of the bags were still there. The compostable bag was really weak and flimsy, but all of the bags were still there. And it really surprised me that these compostable, biodegradable bags that I thought would disappear like an orange were still in the soil. And how about the ones that were in the ocean? Now, this one was really exciting, and I want you to take a deep look into this picture here, because all of our samples were covered in wonderful wildlife. So we had sea squirts. You can see some sea squirts there. They're quite fun because if you poke them, they squirt water at you. And we also had some starfish. So the little red animals in the center of the screen are actually called brittle stars, and they have really flimsy legs. But the scary thing was that the compostable bag did disappear, but all of the other bags were still there. And these were the bags in the ocean. And this is the picture that kind of made the media, that it's me with a bag that's been in the ocean for 3 years, that's called biodegradable, that can still hold a full bag of shopping. Let's take a deeper look. This bag was heavy. It had my whole shopping for the next few days. So I had a can of beans, some bananas, some pasta, and some cereal. See if you can have a look what's inside that bag. But I never thought that these bags would be here after 3 years. So we need to always consider how something's going to act in the environment and whether there's another environmental choice that could be greener. And some new bit of research, this is actually really new, and some of you guys are the first to hear about it, one of the first people to hear about it, is looking at maritime rope. And think about what rope can be used for. So people that have a yacht might use a rope to pull in the sails, or if you're going fishing, you might use the rope to haul up your load of fish. So here's me and my friend Aaron, and we wanted to investigate how many tiny plastic fragments could fall off the rope when it's being used. To do this, we used a boat, and we actually got to go out to sea and test it when we were on top of the ocean. But then also I built a replica, I built a system that looked exactly the same, and I used it in the lab. And it involved me pulling rope for days and days and days, but the results was really interesting. So we found that rope, when it's pulled, it can fragment tiny bits of plastic. So I want you to imagine that you're pulling up a huge load of fish or something really heavy in the ocean. And that rope, with all of that weight, is going to, almost like snow, drop loads of microplastics into the ocean. And we found the older the rope, the more it's being exposed to sunlight, the more microplastic bits that it would fragment. So we're calling for better methods that we can look after rope and make sure it doesn't get too old, so we replace it more regularly so that there'll be less snowy microplastics. So, is plastic pollution everywhere? And this led me onto some crazy research involving Mount Everest, where a National Geographic team went all the way to Mount Everest and they travelled to near the summit, and they offered to get us some snow samples, which was really exciting. So we took snow samples all the way from Everest Base Camp to a place called Everest Balcony, which is just 400 meters below the summit. So see if you can look in that picture, you can see. And here's me with one of the samples. So this sample is all the way from the top of Everest. And I was really excited to see what was in the snow. And the scary thing was that in every single snow sample, we found plastic. So see how many pieces of fibre you can see in this picture. I can count 5. And we found that there could be up to 70 microplastics per litre of snow. So imagine a drinks bottle, which is about a litre. There could be 70 pieces of plastic in there, which is just in the snow around us, which shows that plastic can be moving around the world, in the air and in the water, potentially in the soil. So plastic is everywhere. But that's why we need you as plastic detectives to now fight this problem. And it created so much media frenzy and discussion. And it really taught me that we are all part of this problem, but then we're all part of the solution. And small changes can make a huge difference. So only buying facial scrubs that don't contain microbeads in it could stop millions potentially entering the ocean. And that's a decision that you can make when you're at the shop. Refusing plastic carrier bags, and maybe you have something that's reusable instead, or reusing a plastic carrier bag if you've got one in your house is also a really good idea. Only washing your clothes when you need to will stop hundreds of thousands of fibres potentially entering the ocean. So don't forget that you have a huge amount of power and knowledge, and now you can use that to fix the planet. So will you join me as a plastic detective? I really hope you will. With all of your skill sets and how clever you all are, and I can see how excited you all are as well. So join me as a plastic detective and let's investigate how we can try and make our oceans clean again. So everyone is a piece of the puzzle to make change, and we need all of you. And now I'm really excited to answer any of your questions.
Well, friends watching, we're coming towards the end of our show. You've asked such amazing questions. And I want to ask a question, Imogen, on behalf of everyone. For those of us who want to join your mission and be a plastic detective today, what is something we could start doing to help out?
My main tip is start small, because then you'll see your environmentalism grow and grow and grow. So if you see some litter on the floor and it's safe to do so, pick it up and put it in the bin.
Well, you heard it from the expert. Now let's become experts with her. It's been so wonderful having you here today, Imogen. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. I've really enjoyed it. Thanks, everyone, and see you again.
Well, I bet many of you are interested in more opportunities of exploration after today's show. So I hope you'll check out our resources. There are so many. They're free, they're outstanding, they're wonderful. And you can find them all at natgeoed.org. Also, we're going to be here next week, same day, same time, with another amazing explorer. I hope you'll register now for our next show with Jenny Berglund, and you're going to be learning all about life in the deep ocean. We're also proud to have a show right before Halloween. We're going to learn about echolocation in bats with explorer Yasi Yavel. Also, happy Hispanic and Latinx Heritage Month. There are so many of our explorers and community members who identify as Latina, Latino, and Latinx. And their stories, their cultures, and their histories are really important. So we hope that all of our viewers will take some time this month to learn more about this special season of celebration. Have a great day, everyone. Stay curious, keep exploring,